how do you get into a cult?
Well, Mo, you start off by having a very dysfunctional childhood and well, my mother had a narcissistic personality disorder, so she ran the family like a cult. She was basically my first cult leader. She triangulated my brothers and I so that we were always at odds. We've, been at odds since we were little. And then she was the arbitrator of truth and dictated what people did with their lives. And if you didn't follow her guidance or fit into her plans, then there was, she would punish and ostracize and control. So I emerged from the family. We were pretty wounded. I was pretty damaged, really no self-love and floundering. And then I met the man who was my first husband, and the other thing about my mother too, she's an atheist. She was like a militant atheist, hated God, spat the word out of her mouth with as much venom as she could muster, told us that anyone who believed in God was almost subhuman. And so I grew up with this superior attitude that somehow I knew better than other people and everyone else was in on this bad joke. But when I met my first husband, he actually done 4 tours of Vietnam, like a warrior in the true sense of the word, both spiritually and, physically.
Mm-hmm.
And he gave me some books to read, including like autobiography of a yogi and The Little Prince and whatever. And that just really opened my mind to there being more to life than what's perceivable through the 5 senses, so there is a higher power and a greater purpose than just, being born and dying. So he really started my journey, my spiritual journey. And then he helped me live my dream, which was to be on some land and becoming self-sufficient, growing vegetables, chickens, horses and all that. And he was working both of us worked as outdoor educators, teaching climbing and paddling and skiing and hiking and whatever. And he was working in the corporate field and I was working with people who had mental health diagnoses and whatever, young people. And it was really enjoying life. We had a 3-year-old son and I was 3 months pregnant with our second child, and he went off to work one day. It was just the first day of his a big job with a new company that he'd started. And I got a knock on the door about 10 o'clock in the morning from the local cop and a neighbor, and they said that he died, found him dead in his car. And
No.
that was just like I just wanted to die in that moment. I really did. I didn't. In fact, if I hadn't had a child and I hadn't been pregnant, I would have taken myself out. It was just too much pain. And I was completely lost. My dreams had gone. My dreams of a family, of growing old with, my best friend and the farm and all that was gone in that instant. So I then went floundering around trying to find a reason to live, where to live and how to live. And that ended. And so I was, searching for its spiritual guidance and spiritual teacher, and I met this individual, and I did a shamanic workshop where we were in silence and basically in darkness for 5 days, and had an experience, and where I was then guided to go and start training with him. So I called him when I got back from the trip, and he invited me to his ashram in California, and I went there, believing that was entering into a relationship with a guru. He was my guru, and I was living in an ashram, and we were his disciples and helping him with his ministry, which was, he believes he's the second coming of Christ, the Kalki avatar, the Maitreya, and here to save humanity. So we were his disciples helping him save the world.
And you were fine with his perspective on all?
Honestly, it felt uncomfortable from the start, but I felt like I was where I needed to be. And so I overrode those feelings. And I do believe that I was where I needed to be. It's a paradox, really, of having to trust yet it doesn't necessarily feel that right,
Mm-hmm.
at least in that situation. So I had, by that time, my children were like 5 and 7, and we had sex one time to consummate the marriage, and I got pregnant, and so we had a daughter, and that really bound me to him and the whole cult experience, because having come from divorced parents, I wanted a family, and I
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to put my children through what I'd been through, so I sort of trapped myself. And also he was telling me that if I'd gone through hundreds of thousands of lifetimes to get to this point, so if I turned my back on him, then I basically turned my back on God and my purpose and all that sort of stuff. So I felt trapped.
Okay.
There was it was hell. It really was hell. He, professing to be a divine being, a being of pure love, yet he was a hypocrite. He was just handed out punishments to the children and other adults. People if they didn't come up to his standard, or they didn't do things the right way or as he wanted them, then he would hand out writing lines, or sleeping in your car, or picking up dog shit, or having to eat the food that you just cooked because it wasn't up to his, just punishments. So everyone was in the ashrams fearful of being punished. So people were, when you're fearful, then you're more likely to conform. So because you don't want to get punished.
How many people were there in the cults when you joined?
There were I'd say about 30. So we had the cult homes in an area of Laguna Hills in Southern California. Still there. You can go drive by the house right now. He's still got his shingle out, cult home. And there were about, say, 30 people who lived in the area, but there were only probably about, say, 20 who lived in the actual cult homes. And then he had a cult headquarters in Melbourne, and that was the same. Maybe 20 people lived in the homes, and more people would come along for the meetings and the satsangs, which is supposed to be the gathering of like minds. I don't know. I haven't been involved in the cult for a long time, so it's small in terms of other cults. It's probably less than 50 people at the moment, but enough people to keep him not working and just running the cult for nearly 20 years now. Because to be in the cult, or to be in his presence, or talking to him online or whatever, you have to pay, and it's called tithing. You would have heard of tithing before. You give 10% of your income to the
10%,
whoever's
like an extra
10%
tax.
of gross income. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And that means that if you get an inheritance, then you have to pay him 10%. If you sell your car, 10%. If you get, he's taking. You sell your house. I might have said that, but yeah, you have to pay 10% to him, and it's kept him living a luxurious lifestyle now for 20 years. So it's kind of a clever cult operation, because he's small enough to stay under the wire. And the other thing that he's done, he's seriously traumatized people. Like it took me probably 15 years to start speaking out about what happened, because it took a long time for me to understand what happened, and then to come to the place where I wanted to talk about it. And then there are a lot of ex-cult members, and a number of them, not very many, have contacted me. And when I invite them, do you want to record a conversation about it? Hardly. Most people are so traumatized they don't even want to talk about it. They don't want to acknowledge it. And that's the other different thing about this cult, because what I'm seeing now is there are a lot of ex-cult members, and this is how it starts, right? There's a whistleblower who points the finger and says, hey, this is going on here, and then other cult members will come up and tell their stories. Well, it's really hard to get that traction of this cult, because the damage he's done is so deep. Because it's spiritual rape in a way, but for the men of the cult, most of the men, it was actually physical rape. Because while we had sex one time and consummated the child, he never touched me again in an intimate way for the rest of the marriage, which was like 8 years. So while I'm living in a celibate marriage, and he's telling me that's for my highest and best because I'm too needy, I'm too much like a man, I'm too disrespectful, and then it was just, that's what you need to do. He's off having sex and grooming the boys of the cult and the men of the cult, in addition to being on the grinder and the gay hookup apps. He's on those, so he was not celibate, and there was I didn't find out these things for a long time.
So it went behind your back as well. So it was nothing you just lived with for many years. Wow. Okay.
And not just completely behind my back. Like, he would go into my daughter's bedroom while she was at school and have massages like all day long. And then he would have these late night sessions in the hot tub with the men and all that. And it was, it was very just horrific experience being in that relationship with him.
Wow. First of all, thank you so much for sharing the story. Like, as you said, it's a rare thing to come for because it is such a traumatizing experience. I can, of course, only imagine through what amount of pain you must have gone through. First, of course, the incident with your first husband that leads to the next probably bad thing. How did you get out of this cult?
I didn't know I was in a cult, right? I didn't know. There was a joke around the cult where, we were the cult that wasn't a cult because there are a shit ton of psychos claiming that they're the Messiah, that they're the Jesus, right? There's a lot of them out there. And so he's the real one.
Uh-huh.
And we're all we're the cult that's not a cult. So I didn't realize I was in a cult, and I was so mind fucked and just committed to this spiritual path. And he was telling me that, it's all me, it's all my fault. That's why there's so much suffering if I just change and grow and heal. And, I knew I was wounded. I understood that, mentality. But it wasn't until the death of my son that really snapped me out of that really broke me free from the brainwashing and the mind control. And
what did happen to your son, if it's okay if I ask?
He was found dead behind the house. He'd gone missing, and we reported him missing. And his death was blamed on it was what they call labeled as suicide, and then I was blamed for that because he found out he was gay apparently, and I wouldn't have accepted that, which is just evil, heinous lies, all of it. And after then again, I wanted to die. I didn't want to live anymore. That was just even worse than the other time. But I had 2 children, and I didn't feel that was fair of me to put them through even more suffering. So I went basically from breath to breath for about 6 months. I really didn't get up much. I just breathed, stayed alive. And then I knew I was in serious trouble because I really wanted to exit. So I went along to see this guy who'd been a cult counselor. There was other experts who were supposed to go and see, like a kinesiologist and all that, because we're all so messed up. We need extra help besides just the embodiment of God.
Mm-hmm.
But I hadn't gone to see him when I was in the cult, but I went to see him about 6 months after my son had been murdered, and allegedly, I'm supposed to say. And I walked in the door, and he said, "I knew you'd come and see me one day. You're in a cult. You know you're in a cult, don't you?" And I said, "No, I don't know I'm in a cult. I thought I was in an ashram with my guru." And he said, "Go home and Google cult characteristics." So I went home, and sure enough, there's the list. Charismatic leader who's the arbitrator of truth, who demands obedience and hands out punishments with the love bombing. You're the most beautiful woman in the world, followed by hate bombing. You're the Antichrist. There's the tithing and the gaslighting, which is it comes from this play, the term gaslighting, where the husband was trying to make the wife lose her mind by adjusting the dimming and the brightness of the gas lights back before electricity. And he would adjust the lighting and she would say, "Oh, it seems dimmer." And he would say, "Oh, I can't notice anything." And so that gaslighting technique was constant throughout the ashram, the days of the cult. He would say that he said something, that I said something, that we did something, that, just, I remember the first time I remember it, he sent me off to the supermarket with a list of things to buy, obviously, because I sort of came as the housekeeper. And coming from Australia, the brands are all different. So he's so particular. I got to make sure I get all the right brands. And he sent me out to get this particular brand of toilet paper. And when I came home, he told me it wasn't what he told me to get. But it makes you gaslighting makes you second guess yourself and eventually makes you go crazy. So that was happening, as well as, these psychological operations, like someone in the cult just got enlightened, or my daughter's the embodiment of Lord Ganesha. That went on for years, that one, she's Lord Ganesha's from the Hindu pantheon, the remover of obstacles. So she come to bring me closer to God and all this just garbage stuff. So, it was once I went through that checklist, check. I thought, I am in a cult. And no one had ever told me I was in a cult. Although apparently my parents knew. They went off to see they didn't do anything together, but apparently this day they went off to see a cult expert in Australia. And I don't know what he told them, because I only just found out about this years after. But no one said anything, no friends, no one. And it wasn't until, this man told me that I actually woke up or snapped out of it, or actually got to see from a different perspective. And so I'm a bit different from other people who say, if you know someone's in a cult, like, don't tell them, because you'll just drive them further into the cult and then create a greater distance between you and them. And that may be true, but if someone hadn't told me, I don't know what it would have taken to get me out. But I think also what would have helped, I know that there was a lot of times during the cult where I really was batshit crazy. But I believe if, say my parents had got a private eye and had him followed and had photos taken of him, when he's going to the gym, or, actually, with hooking up with other men, or do a financial audit so I can see that the money coming in is going out to him. And so I'm provided. I think it's important to provide people with evidence of it being a cult, not just saying you're in a cult, but just explain why. And then maybe have testimony from other cult members. I did have, actually, that's not true that I didn't get any heads up, but before I went to Australia one time, I got a anonymous note from some cult members saying, when you get to Australia, get a lawyer. Your husband's a homosexual. He's, fucking other men, and you need to protect yourself. So, that's when I got out. I knew I had to get out, but I couldn't get out straight away, because he still had me so messed up in my head, as if I left. Then he said my screams would reverberate throughout the universe when I realized the depth of my mistake and all that, just all this garbage. So, but finally I got the strength and the courage to leave. And that's when I came to Kauai, and that's really where my healing started.
Did just let you go, or did you really need to escape?
No, he let me go. And I think that he let me go because he knew he was going to have another death on his hands, and he didn't need any more attention on him.
Are you afraid at these times that he's
absolutely
never
not
coming back?
No, I'm not afraid of him at all. Not afraid of anything that's evil. Nothing. I'm totally connected to the light. I sun gaze every morning. I body as much light as I can. I claim protection. I ask for protection. I give thanks for protection. And he's just a little, that's the thing about these psychopaths, and he's dangerous in a psychological way. And also there are a number of suspicious deaths in the cult besides my son's, but underneath all these psychopathy and all that, there are, there's a very wounded, deeply wounded individual, and often there's also demonic forces as well. So no, I'm not afraid.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that story. Since then, I reckon a lot has happened. For instance, you now are the leader of Feeling Better Naturally and also an author of multiple books. How did you structure your life afterwards? How did you rebalance from those very, very bad traumatic experiences?
what rebalanced me was spending time in nature. I cannot stress this enough. It's really important for all of us. We become disconnected from the natural world, and it's extremely disadvantageous for our physical health, our mental health, and our spiritual health. So once I haven't worn shoes for about 8 years. I mean, obviously, if the ground's sharp or whatever, I'll wear shoes. But generally, I stay grounded, connected to the earth energy, because Earth's a giant battery. In fact, all of nature's the energy is always giving to us. So we just need to be open and receive the energy, whether it's from the wind or the trees or the stars or the earth. So I started the practice of grounding and just spending time hiking, or I spent a lot of time in the ocean too. And that helped calm my nervous system. Because basically most people, I heard you talk about how stress has become like just a normal part of life. And over there in Germany, like that's probably pretty like ubiquitous, really. So the best way to rebalance, like electromagnetically, and calm the nervous system and come back into equilibrium is to be connected to the earth. In fact, there's no other way. Obviously, you can do other things, like you could really hug a tree, carry crystals, you can do meditations and things like that to be grounded and connected to the earth. But it's so fundamental to our well-being to be spending time directly connected to the earth, bare feet on earth, lying on earth, walking on grass, walking on wet sand, whatever, touching trees, touching plants. It's essential because it's making people very, very sick. So once I got kind of balanced again, and then I started doing this practice of sun gazing. So that really expanded my consciousness. I can feel how it was working. I don't know how it was working, but I know it was working because like I could understand, oh my God, why it happened to me because of my lack of self-love. And then what I needed to do to establish self-love. That was primary after I rebalanced my nervous system, because that was that lack of self-love that basically had led me into the cult and made me like vulnerable to abuse from narcissists, because that cult didn't end that pattern of getting into relationships with the narcissists. It was only when I finally nailed it, like after years of repetitions of affirmations, I love myself, treating myself gently, forgiving myself, which is still a work in progress, just being gentle with myself. And being gentle. Because I also did a lot of research too to understand narcissistic personality disorder. It was all well and good to point the finger at him, but what did that mean about me? Why was I connected to him? And that was because of lack of self-love, codependency. Narcissism and codependency, you've got the same root, which is lack of self-love. They just present differently. So I had to learn to get my love and approval and from within. From myself. And then I, researching cult dynamics and cult programming, and then I could see all that, the strategies that were used on me, like I said, the gaslighting and the psychological operations, and then recognizing how that is playing out on a global scale. There were we're being gaslit the whole time by the mainstream media and television and politicians and bankers and religious leaders. They're not. They might be speaking some truth, but not all truth, and sometimes they're just full-on lies. And so, I have become really completely dedicated to the truth, discovering the truth, and that sent me on a path to then, well, what is true here? What is true about this reality? Is there something more than just the 9 to 5, work routine? What's really going on?
That would have been
Who's
my
really
next
running
question.
this show? Yeah. So that's that. In addition, so then I also in expanding my consciousness through sun gazing, I was and just being in nature too. Being away from electronic devices and away from like black screens. That helped expand my consciousness. Also through like breath work, and entheogens. So sacred plant medicines, whether that's like cannabis or ayahuasca or whatever it is, those plant medicines are available to us to expand our consciousness, to connect us with the divine, to help us let go ways of being that no longer serve us and to open into new ways of being. So that was also something I did have done, and they're the main practices that I use to heal. And it's an ongoing process, it still requires work.
Do you think you'll ever heal completely from what you've endured?
No. I don't know how I could not have the holes in my heart from the people who I loved, and are not here. I haven't heard anyone. I think what happens with the grief is it just stays, but a bigger space grows around it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but because I can tap into it at any time, and it's just as, it's just as strong. Or not just as strong. That's not true. It does decrease over time, but it's still very present, and I think I just have to learn to live with it. And that's another thing too. It's people so often apologize when they cry. We never should apologize for our tears, because the other part of the healing is to experience emotions, because emotions are like energy in motion. So if we're suppressing the emotions, or we're denying them, or just skipping over them, those feelings or those emotions stay locked in the body, and that can cause different types of illnesses and diseases and things like that too. So I feel it's important to express our emotions. Obviously, crying is one of those ways. To express anger is really important, but in ways that don't do harm to any other living being. So you can like punch a punching bag, scream in your car with the windows up and no one around. You can write and burn, you can do gardening, go for a run. There are many ways. You can yell into a hole in the ground and cover it back up. Like, there are lots of techniques to move anger without hurting anyone else, because it's really important that we do express our emotions safely for everyone. And I think that's an ongoing process, because these emotions do arise. And once they're like felt and let go, then, we can move on. And I don't experience the kind of depths of rage and things that I busted blood vessels in my eyes from doing rebirthing and screaming my guts out because I'm so full of rage. But, eventually I don't have to go there. But still, it's feeling emotions and expressing them clears the way to then move into a more like peaceful, balanced, graceful way of being.
Wow. I think I've never meant it that serious when I said thank you so much for your insights into your story, sharing your story after all that happened, and doing the work you're doing every single week. Where can people go to get to know you a bit better, to get to know your books, or even buy them?
I have a website. It's feelingbetternaturally.love. And I have a YouTube channel, Feeling Better Naturally. And I also have a Substack that's Feeling Better Naturally. And you can get my book. You can get it on Amazon. It's such a fabulous book. It's got so many natural medicines and body technologies and spiritual technologies that we can use to navigate through this time. This is a paradigm shift. We are moving into the collective consciousness is shifting from one that's very dark to one that's light, and the light of the sun is intensifying. So, we're all being affected by this. When you can understand what's going on, and then you have some tools that you can use, it makes navigating through this time much easier, with much less suffering and confusion and anxiety. So most of these tools are readily available, they're free, they're effective, and they're necessary.
Thank you so much for everything. Have a great day.
Thanks, Mo. Thanks for your platform. Thanks for giving me this opportunity and sending you lots of light.